My name is César, and actually I'm not in Wellington today. I'm in Tri City enjoying the weather and 11 weeks of CSI, 2-star, 3-star. So Traverse City is actually an amazing place to be in. We have the second of the show with Ian Millar. So thanks Ecuestre Digital, working hard in Kentucky now with the show, and Cavalario López Quesada, who's you're supporting us, very valuable. So thank you very much. And Estefan Godoy for all the translation, for the subtitles. So everyone this in Spanish. Así por favor, olviden que pueden también verlo en español con los subtítulos. Así gracias a la hermana Godoy por toda esta ayuda. Well, Ian, we're back again. And this second half, we're going to talk a little bit about the sport itself. And we want to see what is your point of view, your opinion, and your analysis. And we had a lot of shows where the typical topics, the ranking cards, the core, the access to important shows. Even mentioned that he suggests 6-star competitions. So avoid so many competitions at 5-star level where they're actually same standard to give the same points. So he believes having a series of competitions and make it for the best. So what is your opinion about the sport today and all topics?
Well, I don't know how much I have to add on on the ranking situation and who should get to go to these shows. I mean, I've heard some of your other guests on the subject, and I've certainly talked to many other riders about it. The one thing that it does occur to me, is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Tennis, golf, various other sports have had to deal with these problems as well. I don't know that we're dealing with it all that badly, to be honest with you. Could it be better? Probably. Does the ranking list protect a little bit that top group? Once they're there, they're there. Yeah, that argument could be made. What do I think about the pay cards? No, I've never been a fan. I think it should be more pure. The good ones are the good ones, and if you can't earn your way there, you shouldn't be there. You could have different competitions for those people if you wanted to. But really, it's never been that big an issue for me, because in North America, as you know, you can get into almost any competition. All you got to do is pay your entry fee. It gets a little more difficult now in Wellington in the winter. There's quite a few riders these days. But what have they done? They've run they've run a 5-star and a 2-star at the same time, and a rider can only go in one. So that opens it up to quite a group of riders. It solved itself quite nicely in North America, and then all through my career, I was successful enough that if I wanted to go somewhere else in the world, I was able to do it. I was high enough on the list or whatever. I do appreciate that some riders in Europe are going to say, I never get the opportunity. And I have this owner with this wonderful horse that I'm riding, and because I can't take it to the bigger shows, I lose my horse to a rider who can go to those shows. Well, that needs to be rectified for sure. So does the system need tweaking? It probably does, but by and large, I don't know, it seems to be working all right. But whether we can learn some things from other sports or not, it would be the question. But everybody for sure has an opinion on it.
And what about star competition?
You said, what about 5-star competitions?
No, 6 stars. So he believes that there needs to be a series of a 6-star. So have a higher standard.
Again, this is a difficult one because a rider is only part of the equation. The horse is the other part of that equation. And you can take a rider with their number one horse, and if something happens to that number one horse and they come with their number two horse, they're not even in the same game anymore, necessarily. There's not so many riders that are going to have a first and a second horse that are pretty much as good as the other. And so horses are constantly going off form and getting injured and on and on and on and on. And so to lock a particular group of horse rider combinations, because to me that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to lock it into horse rider combinations because the game changes automatically if somebody brings a weaker horse. I don't know that I like that.
Ian, the ranking today is linked with the entry system only with the overall ranking, not with the jump horse and rider combination. You don't think they need to link horse and rider combination to maintain this and avoid the problem that you already said?
Absolutely, and it would level the playing field as well. I mean, think of back in the day when Nick just had Big Star, and look what he did on the rankings, just with that one horse, and what the rankings did to him with just that one horse. There's been other riders the same, and then I remember some years ago, I believe it was a French rider, and he had a lot of horses, but he never went in any of the big classes, but he went to every show and went like crazy in every show, and he was way, way up in the list because of that. So yeah, there's anytime you see the list getting used improperly or it's not getting the result that you want, then you tweak it a little bit. And I think this would be one, Leopoldo, that it needs to be a horse rider combination that gets the rankings. And then I guess what you'd have to do is you'd have to say there'd be a limit on the number of. Oh, it'd be tricky to work out, but yes, I think that would be far more equitable because the measure of that rider is very much the horse he's riding. And the minute he doesn't have that horse, it's not the same rider anymore.
Ian,
But
you're the man of record. Oh, sorry.
This Ian have two faces of the coin. But if we're using only horse and rider combination, the welfare of the horse, and we need the ranking need to limit the number of entries with the horse, and it's very difficult to limit somebody to only can show so many times in a year or something like this. I think this is a very tricky situation, but
Agreed.
I think a good thing that they can do is using both, giving certain number of riders and horses combination spots and giving some for the overall ranking to find a middle of the way. And normally you will have a lot of riders with being in both on the top and giving the preference to the horse rider combination. In this way, you will have better riders and better combination in the horse shows. And I think this could be a possibility. What do you think about it?
I like the way you're thinking. I wouldn't say I'm the most qualified person to have this conversation with. You need a lot of statistics to look at, analyze the statistics, and say if we did it this way a year or 2 years ago, we applied this standard, who would we get, and how would that all work out? But to your point, it should not be an attendance thing at all. It has to be a small number or a very fair and limited number of competitions, and that's the way it is. However, then the door we open, some horses are better if they go a little more, and some horses need to go fewer times. So now we're trying to make something that one size fits all, which is real tough to do. I think it's probably one of those situations that will always be a problem. There's never going to be a solution that works perfect for it because it is the horse rider combination. If you were just talking about a human athlete, it'd be way simpler to do. But I don't mind your point of view on it at all, Leopoldo.
Ian,
Carolo.
you are the man of records, okay? 10 Olympics, 55 years in the highest level, 12 times in the Canadian Championship. Did your parents feed you kryptonite?
Well, I was wondering if somebody would ask that question today, and I was thinking about the answer. I said, first of all, you got to be thankful and for the good luck of your good genes. And I think, if we have good genes, it's not something we did. It's our good luck and our parents that did that for us. And obviously my parents gave me very good genes. And then you have to reasonably take care of yourself. And I've always attempted to do that within reason. How you avoid injuries is by staying on good horses and making sure your body is fit and strong enough to take the rigors of the sport and the falls if they do happen. So to that end, I do a workout regime every morning that takes me about an hour and a half, and I never miss a day, 365 days of the year. It's a combination of stretching and strength, and that serves me very, very well. And I stay at it. I do it a lot. So the muscle memory is right there. I'm riding 4 or 5 horses every day, competing actively. I often thought, could you dial it down a little bit and just do a little less? Well, you could, but I think that's risky. If you want to stay at the same standard, you better train the same way. If you start training and practicing less, then you better lower your sights on where you're going to go. And the problem is, when I'm sitting at the end gate watching the person ahead of me put it on, in my mind, I'm going to beat them. And I better be training and preparing the same way, or I won't be safe and prepared to do it.
Ian, talk about gene. A topic that for me is very important is the young horses. Here in America, we are not developing young horses. I mean, limited. The excuse that is being is high cost to have a horse in America, the competitions. Do you think that is the reason, or what would be a solution to promote more the young horse in North America?
Well, I think it's a complicated equation of problems here. One is that we don't necessarily, the culture in North America is not the same as the culture, say, in Belgium, France, Holland, and Germany, and the Scandinavian countries, and many of these other countries. When you go over there, you can find so many young people who really, and boys and girls, who know about horses, who have grown up with horses in a horse farm. I don't know how many times I've gotten in the car and gone down the road in Holland or Belgium, and you stop at so-called breeders. And he might be a cattle farmer, but he has some brood mares, some jumper brood mares, and might be a pig farmer. And sure enough, they have some wonderful jumper brood mares, and it's a hobby of theirs. Where would you go to a beef farm or a pig farm in North America and find the farmer with some show jumping brood mares? I don't know where you'd find that. You wouldn't. It's not our culture. So we do some breeding here in Perth and always have. And the biggest problem is to find the people to develop those horses for us until they're ready for us. And you can't find them. And so by the time we get them as 4-year-olds, they tended to be quite spoiled and uneducated. And we had to do all the heavy lifting in that department because we couldn't find the people to do it. In Europe, there's a pretty big supply of young women and young men that can take that 3-year-old and 4-year-old, they can back it, they can train it, they can go to the little shows, they can get it going around beautifully, so then it is ready when the more senior rider wants to take over. We do not have those young people in enough of quantity in North America to do that. That would be one thing. The other thing is, we're a pretty free-spirited culture in America and Canada, and nobody's going to tell us that we can't breed our Pinto Stallion, who refused to jump, to our Palomino mare with navicular, because if we want to do that, that should be our right. Whereas in the countries where it tends to be very regulated, you can't do that. There's way more, let's say there's a better discipline, or so there is a discipline in the breeding that we don't necessarily have in North America. So as we used to say about the computer business, garbage in, garbage out. It's the same as the breeding. If it's not the right mare and the right stallion, what do you expect? It's going to be a miracle if that little foal goes to the Olympics. It's not likely. So there has to be discipline in the breeding, which we lack. Thirdly, the financial part that you bring up. In Europe, you think of, well, my great friend Paul Hendricks. He has all these young horses that grow up in Poland somewhere, and he brings them back as 3-year-olds, and away they go with them. Or Paul Schockenmuller with his horse, the old East Germany. It's affordable. We have way too much money in them by the time they're 3 or 4 years old. We could go to Europe and buy a 3-year-old cheaper than we can raise one here. The problem is, by the time we get off the plane, are we really seeing the very best ones? That's a little more difficult, because when they're right there looking at their horses every day and they all know them, we get off the plane, why is the very best one being presented to us? I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong here. This would just be nature, human nature. So the financial aspect is the third element that makes it very difficult. So at that point, Cesar, what do? You say, you know what, rather than buy 3 or 4 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds, why don't I just buy one 6 or 7-year-old? Okay. Well, a lot of people went that route, but then the 6 and 7-year-olds got so expensive. And, I often say one of my greatest fears for the sport is that it prices people out. And I see that happen all over the place. People are priced out. All these young kids ever wanted to do was ride a horse and spend time with horses. And they got pretty good at it. That was the bad news, because then they needed a better horse and they wanted to go to bigger and better competitions, and that's when the money shut them down. And what a shame that is. And I often wonder, if I was a kid today trying to make it in this sport, would I be able to? And I don't know. I really might not be able to. It's difficult. It's too expensive, and there's so many good young riders. It's tough, very tough.
Don't you have sort of a solution to that specific problem of financials and give opportunity to those young riders to be part of the sport?
Well, people laugh at people of my vintage, and you're way younger, Cesar, but you'll soon get to my stage. And you start talking about how it used to be, and people roll their eyes and stop listening. But I know you guys will listen. So when I was a kid going to the shows, everyone was a volunteer. The course designer, the judges, everybody was a volunteer. And I remember reading in a Linnaea Peak many years ago, Prince Philip wrote a letter to introduce the book. And he said, the sport will not survive without the volunteer. The volunteer is critical to the sport. And I've always remembered that, because now you go to the competition and everybody is paid, and who is paying is the exhibitor, and that makes it extremely expensive to compete. And that, in fact, rinses people out. I know, to answer you, I don't have a solution. It's the way it's gone, and the market is driving that, and it seems there are enough people that can afford it, and so on it goes. Do I like it? No, not really. I believe there should be an opportunity for everybody, and that is not the nature of our sport. So we do have, it's an unequal playing field for sure. that often leads to unequal representation.
You
Yeah,
don't
for sure.
think, Ian,
Leopoldo
that
had an idea of. He says that one of the maybe Leopoldo, you can address it even better than me. Says that the national competitions and the local competitions are lacking the interest of the riders because people are putting more effort into the bigger shows with bigger prize money. Obviously, makes it more expensive, and that smaller local nationals, which are the grassroots of our sport, people are not putting that big of an effort, and that's actually affecting the total developing of the sport. Is that correct, Leo?
You are correct, and here's the interesting thing. Why that works is because riders, it's because where the marketplace wants to go. And you could say to somebody, there's two shows happening next week. One has a $25,000 Grand Prix, and one has a $100,000 Grand Prix. And they say, well, I want to go to the one that has the 100,000 because I can win more. And I say to them, listen, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but the reality of it is, if you go to that $100,000 Grand Prix, the best case scenario is you will survive. You will not win 5 cents. You go to that $25,000 Grand Prix, you might be second or third, and you win some money. So really, you are going to make more money. You're going to win more money at the $25,000 class than you ever will at the $100,000 class. And you know what the answer I get over and over is? I still want to go to the $100,000 class. So as long as that mindset is there, that's going to be what happens. And, you know, you put your horse where it can win. Not where you want to go, but where your horse can be successful. And if I'm riding a horse that I think can be in the top 3 in a $25,000 class, and there's a $100,000 on the road, I'm going to the 25,000 because I'd rather get paid and have a good experience for the horse. Now that is not to say I'm going to stay there all the time just to get. As soon as I think that horse has a possibility, I'm going to move him up because in the end run, I want to jump for 3 million at Spruce Meadows. But I'm going to step it up as the horse is ready to be successful. I'm not going to put the horse in a place where he can't succeed.
Totally agree with you.
Ian, I know it's a utopia or something like this, but you don't think today everybody, the amateurs, everybody wants to make money from the sport. In the other sport, the amateur don't make money from the sport. And this what makes the sport expensive of every level. I think the sport in the top level need to be expensive, but in the low level can be cheaper. But the prize money put a lot of problems, and I don't know why the amateurs everybody need to make money, but they are amateurs. This is a hobby. This is not a profession. They don't live it from this. All the other sports cost money to them, and they are amateur and finish. I think the situation of the money today changed a little bit and going too far. What do you think about it?
Well, absolutely, and it's sort of the business model of quite a few of these competitions where the prize money in the Grand Prix comes from the entry fees and the stall fees and everything else from all the other divisions. There is not an outside sponsor that is sponsoring that Grand Prix. It's being sponsored internally by the revenue of the horse show, which is coming off these lower divisions. So therefore, the lower divisions have to be charged, and the amateurs and the juniors are charged a lot, so that there can be this prize money in the Grand Prix, which is certainly not an equitable situation. But why does that term come to that competition? Well, it comes to that competition because the Grand Prix riders in that barn to do that. So all the and amateurs and younger, they're all dragged along to that horse show, and they would have been way better off at another competition down the road with a $10,000 Grand Prix or something, and with entry fees at way less and fees way smaller. the idea that the lower divisions have to pay for the free, to me, is quite that's offensive. If I was an amateur rider and I realized I was the exorbitant fees I'm paying are paying for the Grand Prix, I would be offended. That's kind of the way it is.
Ian, is it true the story of Jim Elder's helmet?
Of throwing off his hat?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Oh, absolutely, it was true. And when we're in the competition, I'd be watching him, and he'd be the anchor in one of our nation's cups. And he'd start off, and he was looking pretty good, but I wasn't really getting the inspiration. And then all of a sudden, he'd shake his head, and off would come his hat. And I think now we're going to see the action. And automatically, that horse would start jumping higher and jumping better, and you knew we had a really good chance of a clean round. It was very, very indicative of his mindset and where he was. And there's this thing I always talk about: every horse, every person has an optimum stress level. If we're below it, we're half asleep. If we're past it, we're half nuts. And you want to get every horse, every rider right to that optimum stress level. And that was one of Jimmy's ways of getting himself to his optimum stress level. And he had other ways of doing it. It was so interesting. He'd be at the in-gate sometimes, watching the horse ahead of him, and he'd say to his long-suffering groom, "Let's change the bit." So here they'd be 45 seconds before he's going to go in the ring, and they're trying to change the bit. And the horse is looking like he might run off because the reins are detached and everything else, and everybody's getting wild and excited, and Jimmy was just getting where he needed to be to get fired up to jump that clean round. And it was so interesting to watch him do it. And conversely, if things were getting a little too heated, he'd have little ways where he'd just dial himself down. And I watched that, and I learned well. And I learned how to do it as well. I don't change my bit at the in-gate, I'll tell you that. But I have ways of just making sure I'm right in that zone, and how to get my horse right in that zone.
Wait, but I'm sorry. I don't know what
I'm having to put the audio season.
César,
Hello?
César, te fuiste.
Hello? Hello?
César, hello.
I'm here. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Okay, okay. Hello, César.
I don't know what happened. I'm here. Hello?
Go.
Do you see me or not?
Now it's okay.
Yes.
You can do the question.
Okay, well, see, that's the good about having it so we can edit it. So, no, I was asking is I don't know the story of the helmet.
Oh, well, Jimmy would, this is before chin straps, and he would shake his head and throw his helmet on the ground, basically, and finish the course without his helmet.
And he does that or what?
Oh, he always did it his career, and there was no rule against it. And it was just one of the little things he would do to get himself. I mean, he was just more comfortable, and it just fired him up, and he seemed to ride better when he'd do it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Didn't know that.
And he,
All
he
right.
did, yeah,
Other thing
he did,
today.
he did it at the Olympics in Mexico.
Wow. Okay.
When they were jumping an oxen that was something like 6 feet high and 6 feet wide. And I believe only 2 horses on the day jumped it. One of them was Kevin from Australia. Kevin, help me.
And, Lu
Sorry?
and Lucia Farias from Brazil. And Lucia Farias from Brazil. 2 riders.
Jumped it clear?
Kevin and Lucia Farias. Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, it was a remarkable thing to do. 6 feet by 6 feet, and probably rails that were God knows how heavy, and cups that were not going to give up. And it took some kind of horse and some kind of rider to do that.
The horses
Okay,
need to have a lot of fear to jump in this, to go fast and go on jumping it.
Yes.
Ian, if you have a family where your two children ride, your daughter-in-law ride, and you ride, all competing in a big level, you dreaming to have a breeding nation of four Millers in the team?
Oh, many years ago at Spruce Meadows, one year I had Jonathan and Amy and myself on the same team, and our fourth was Jill Henselwood, and we did the Nations Cup at Spruce Meadows. And oh, that was a long day because I mean you always worry about your fellow team riders, but when your son and your daughter, there's a little multiplier on it. That was tough. And they weren't as good then as they are now. Now they're very good. I used to be nervous watching them go in the ring. I'm not nervous watching them anymore because they know exactly what they're doing and they're very competent. And whenever I'm in a Grand Prix with them, I always think I just have more chances to win because I enjoy it when they win even more than I enjoy it if I win. I can honestly tell you that. There's nothing makes me feel better watching them win less.
Ian, is it true that Big Ben had a major accident in a lorry?
He did. He was going out to the competitions in Alberta in, I guess, late May, early June, and in the prairies in Saskatchewan. In the dead of night, a young man committed suicide in front of our horse truck. He drove his vehicle. He was coming straight towards them on a two-lane road, and at the last second, he swerved over, and the two vehicles hit headlight to headlight. His vehicle went underneath the big highway tractor and took the steering axle off it, so the driver had nothing with the truck, and it sort of bounced along until it got to the edge of the road and then laid over on its side. But the good news was, by the time it laid over, its speed was greatly reduced. And but all the lights went out and everything, and it was pouring rain, and they had to cut the roof off the truck to get the horses out. And one horse was dead. A couple others never really returned to the sport. Big Ben had a week off and won 2 Grand Prix in a row.
Ian, I have a question, and you focus a lot on your physical, but I'm sure you also spend a lot of time mental fitness because for 55 years being the anchor, and I'm thinking the pressure of all your Canadian crowd behind you. How do you work with your mental fitness? What would you be a recommendation for the younger generations of how to work that stress level?
Again, you just find ways of getting to your optimum stress level and staying there. And sports psychologist, when I was learning it, I never heard about a sports psychologist. I don't think it existed in those days. There were psychologists, but not specific sports psychologists. So again, I learned it from the great psychologist, Dr. Elder, just by watching him. I watched Jimmy Elder, and he taught me how to do it. And then I actually read some books on yoga, and sounds strange, but just how to control and regulate your mind, not the physical part of the yoga, but the mental part of the yoga, and how you could basically put yourself to sleep just sitting there, or you could get yourself half nuts just sitting there. There are ways of doing all of this stuff, so you can regulate your own high and your low. And then as time went on, and I got it through our Canadian team, we were exposed to sports psychology. So I sat in on various of these lectures and discussions, and I can't say as I learned anything particularly new. It just compartmentalized what I already knew and put labels on it and organized that knowledge, because I'd learned it the same way as that blind squirrel finds an acorn. I just looked long enough and hard enough till I figured out how to do it. And these young people being given this information right up front. Now, Whether they then take it and use it, that's another question. But I think it's both. You've got to learn how to use it, but you have to be taught how to do it as well. And sports psychology is a great thing. We have Millarbrook Farm is connected to a sports coach, a mental health coach, and he does a lot of really good things with many of our riders. But it's a critical skill to learn. I was thinking about it. Every athlete has to have a healthy amount of insecurity. You have to be insecure enough to wonder if you can get it done, and. And is the skill going to go away? That's an insecurity. And somebody that's too cocky is the opposite. But somebody that is that cocky and thinks, oh, I'm the best that ever was, and my skill is never going to go away, oh, look out, they're not going to be good enough. And the one that's a basket case about wondering what's going to happen to them, they're too hard on themselves. There's just that healthy little zone that you got to be in. And I would tell you that naturally, I've been fortunate that I am in that zone. I have a healthy level of insecurity about what I do on the back of a horse. So I'm always trying to do it better. I'm always working at improving, but I don't feel threatened about my ability. It's just right where it feels comfortable to me. And that's probably another element that's allowed me to do it for this length of time.
And do you have a routine that you follow strictly when you go to a horse show or for the big competition, or anything that you do specifically? And if you don't do it, then you feel that something is not in place?
No, what I do, it's sort of a broad brush. I'll go into, they call it a zone. I'll go into the zone, let's say it's Nations Cup day. And when I get up, well, probably when I went to bed the night before, I was in the zone. And I'll stay in the zone until after that Nations Cup is over. And it's very difficult for any outside influence to take me out of the zone. Really, within reason, doesn't matter what anybody says or does or anything else. I'm in that zone, and you can't shake me off it. That would be the way I do it. I know other people have other ways of doing it, but just getting myself there and not allowing any outside interference is how I do it.
Interesting.
Ian, today, most of the horse shows and even many CSIs only have two classes, ABI, and they only can compete in two times. In the 2 stars, the 5 star, they need to have 3 classes, but only 2 competitions. You don't think this is better to jumping more times during the week and less shows, or jumping less time to the week and more shows? What is better for the horses?
I guess the other little question, or not a question, but the fact is we're using an older horse now than we used to use. It's not unusual 15, 16-year-old horse to be doing these big classes. And whether you're going to ask that horse to do a lot of classes at one competition, maybe not. And maybe that horse is better to jump twice in a month and possibly jump even 9, 10 months of the year, just jumping a couple of times a month. Because again, at 15, 16, if you ever totally let him down, it's plenty hard to get him back physically. So once he's there at 15 or 16, you better keep him there until you're ready to retire him. But you can't go too hard. There's only so many miles, only so many kilometers left. So be very careful how you use them. A younger horse who's naturally just a really fit, sound individual, he can go more and more and more. So I don't think there's any one size fits all. It just is the individual horse. But again, to your point, back in the day, we would go to a competition like Spruce Meadows and we would jump 5 days in a row, doing the Grand Prix on Saturday and the Derby on Sunday. And there was an overall championship award for the five days. And then everybody thought, well, this is a little hard on the horses. Maybe we should give them Friday off. So we go 4 days. And everybody thought we're getting too soft then. And I do not recall horses breaking down because of what we did with them. They were fit enough to do it, they were strong enough to do it, and they did it. Things have changed. These horses just aren't used to going that hard. We go back to when wonderful Dixon gave me the great president of the CP, and he jumped 5 rounds in 2 days. And his jumper off round number 5, was just as strong as his first round. And it did him no harm in his body. He was fit enough to do it, and he had endurance and he had strength. And that's the other thing we got to give these horses. When we fit them up to do the job, a weightlifter looks totally different than a long distance runner. But these show jumpers need both. They need endurance and they need strength. So we got to put both of those into their conditioning. And I think, remember Frank Athothak said to me many years ago, I make my horses strong enough and fit enough that they can jump 5 rounds, so 2 rounds should not be a problem. He said it in that lovely German way, but it's a good message. Make them so darn strong. And I always think if somebody finishes a competition, they say, well, we didn't do so well, my horse got tired. Shame on them, because that horse getting tired was on them. Their feeding program, everything about it. If that was done right, that horse would not have gotten tired. If my horse gets tired, shame on me.
Ian, did you enjoy in the CSI of Madrid years ago?
Did I which? Sorry?
Did you enjoy it in the CSI of Madrid years ago?
Yes, I certainly did. It was a great competition, and our Canadians did well. It was a lovely city, great hospitality. It was wonderful.
Ian, I have a question. Now, you're into training now more than jumping the big classes. I mean, how is that? You have always been training from the early, or you're just into it lately?
I didn't quite get the question, César.
The training of horses and training of riders. Is that something
Yes.
you have done live, or you're more focused now on this?
Oh, I would say it's a similar percentage of the balance, although my eye is, I would say my eye is more on the students now than it used to be, and my focus is more on them than it used to be, because when I'm going to the competitions now, I'm not doing the Nations Cups. I'm doing the other competitions, and I just have a little different outlook on it. That's why I stepped back from the Nations Cup. It wasn't that I didn't, the same passion and drive wasn't, it was starting to slip a little bit. And it was time to give the others a chance, because only 4 people can ride on that team. And if there's that same group doing it for years and years and years, you risk an entire generation of riders never learning to become team riders or have the opportunity to do it. And I did it for that many years. I did it since 1971 was the first time I rode on a team, and I've been doing it ever since. So for that many years, there were only 3 spots available on most Canadian teams that went somewhere. And then during that time, Eric Lamaze came along, and he's been doing it a long time. So now there are only 2 spots on that team. That lacks a certain fairness at some point. These other riders need their shot and deserve their shot. So that was part of the reason I stepped back. And the other part was the concentration and the emotional commitment to a Nations Cup is quite different than the same emotional commitment to a Grand Prix. You go in that Grand Prix, and if you have a good day, that's great. And if you have a bad day, well, okay, you say you're sorry to your groom and your owner, and we'll do better the next time. In a Nations Cup, you got to say you're sorry to your whole nation and your teammates. And so it's a huge responsibility, the Nations Cup, which I always took very seriously, and it always took a lot of effort. When I'd finish a Nations Cup, it really took energy from me, way more than a Grand Prix, and that was because of the mental aspect of it. So yeah, that would be the answer to that.
So, and now that you mentioned Nations Cup, also that is a product that the FEI is supporting because, as you know, the Nations Cup are a little bit with all the available shows around the same dates. So we had Pedro Venice here, who you know he's the new representative in the jumping committee, and he said that they're working hard to keep promoting and to come with the Nations Cup in the FEI. But he sees that also is prize money, one of the biggest about riders going to ride 2 rounds and then split the money between 4 or 5. But if they do a survey, everyone loves the Nations Cup. So balance both about horses and riders willing to compete, but the prize money. So I think it's your opinion of how to promote and keep Nations Cup as our sport.
Well, we're doing these Longines Nations Cups, and then for the best rider, there was a bonus of €50,000, the best score. And if there were double cleans, they split it up and so forth. That was a lovely incentive. And when we went up to Ocala, where we won that one, and then my son Jonathan was on a team down in Mexico, and they won that one. And none of them did the Grand Prix on Saturday. They held up for the Nations Cup on Sunday. And it was not a hard sell for our Mark Laskin, our chef, to keep. He just said, listen, this formula is going to work. We're going to have a fresher horse. We're going to have fresher horses on Sunday. We got a better chance. What do you guys want to do? And they all said, we want to win the Nations Cup. And so they all stepped back. What do you do about that? I don't know. Do you make the Nations Cup richer and the Grand Prix not as big a money class to balance it out? I don't know. The other thing about the Nations Cup that's interesting is it works for some competitions, and for other competitions, it doesn't particularly work. Like Spruce Meadows, it really works for Spruce Meadows, that Nations Cup. When we used to do the old fall circuit, which was Harrisburg, Washington, New York, and the Royal Winter Fair, the Nations Cup worked. It really worked for Toronto because it was always aired live on national television on the first Saturday, which was always normally a cold, rainy day, and everybody was watching television. So it was a huge deal. It didn't particularly work for Harrisburg, not so much for Washington. The way they did it in New York at Madison Square Gardens, we jumped the first round, last class in the afternoon, and the second round, first class in the evening. So the people would come in for the evening performance and they hadn't even seen the first round. So they didn't have the flavor of it or anything else. So, I mean, it kind of worked, but not nearly as well as it should have. So I think the competitions where it works, like down in Wellington when we do it on Saturday night, it works well. Other places you do it, it doesn't work as well. So again, that's not my field of expertise, but I think perhaps if you balance the money out and that Nations Cup got richer and the Grand Prix got a little less money in it, that would balance it out. And you figure out how to make it work for that individual horse show or that individual competition and make it the premier class. Not equal with the Grand Prix, but superior. The class that people want to come and see at that competition is going to be the Nations Cup. If you can do that, then away you go.
All right. Sorry, my computer just died, so I'm using the iPad now. Are you with me? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
I
yes,
sure
yes.
can.
We hear you. Ian, in Spruce Meadows, we're doing so many classes with a ranking point and don't competing in the main ring for less than 36, $5,000, something like this. But many riders go into practice, don't show. And it's very difficult with the sponsors, with everybody, the riders go on practice and don't go for the class.
Well, you can
What do you think
imagine.
what will be the solution?
Yeah, you can imagine. For me, I grew up in a time when a huge Grand Prix was $5,000, and we'd really get excited about $5,000. 25,000 was unheard of, so we were really fired up. So for me to go in school in a class of 30-some thousand dollars is just so. It makes me break out in hives. I'm allergic to doing it. I couldn't do it. I mean, I got to be competitive. It's by nature, but yes, I recognize today's riders do that, and the effect it has on the sponsors. And I remember we went through a time when if you were going to just train, you had to say, and you would go at the beginning of the order, and that's kind of gone away. Although we'll get to jump offs, and the person just doesn't go as hard. What is the answer to that? I don't know. It's possible. Spruce Meadows is. I hate to be critical of the great Spruce Meadows, and I'm not being critical. I'm kind of asking a question and thinking out loud at the same time. Are they trying to have too many premier events in one competition? In other words, all week long, 5 days, 3 international competitions a day. That's 15 premier competitions at one deal, at one meet. That causes a problem. You better be very deep in horses and very competitive horses to be able to do that, and not so many riders are. I'd be interested in the panel's viewpoint on that one. Is it trying to put too much activity into one meet?
But Spruce Meadows thinking, and we thinking, and for the benefit of the riders, to make it more competition and
Sure.
giving more money in every class. It's something that putting the balance is very difficult, but we try to put it more money in every class and making good and have it a show with a lot of competition, with a lot of ranking points and a lot of money. And in the other side is this problem. And here was Nelson Pessoa, and he said it's a mistake for the riders when they go and they don't go to the time allowed, they go slow, and it's bad for them. But if they going to go in the ring, they need to go in the pace of the normal classes. It's the way to training. In your feeling, you have the same feeling as Nelson Pessoa?
Absolutely, and when we're training at home, I'll often say to my students, "You're getting a time fault. You're getting a time fault." And we actually we're all here during this period of time, and they all live on the premises. So we've been having we've been doing a lot of training and a lot of teaching. And last week we had a little horse show. Let's call it a horse show. And we had a course, and we went back to the old optimum time. And my daughter and one of our trainers went around on young horses, and they set the optimum time. And then everybody had to make that optimum time. Well, we discussed it. I said, you guys were too slow. Leopoldo and the boys, they would have knocked down like 2 or 3 seconds. And so we tightened it up a little bit. But it was interesting. Everybody was within a couple of seconds. And so we were just teaching them to go at a horse show speed. And yes, so we teach that at home. We practice that at home. When we're training out on the field and we're turning a corner, I said that corner is too wide. That's a time fault turn. You've got to educate your eye and your horse to come through that corner very, very comfortably, way tighter, or you won't make the clock. If you're good on your corners, you don't have to go as fast everywhere else. So learn to be able to do both. Go fast when you have to be, and make it up on the turns. So yes, that's very part of practicing at home. And so then when you go to the competition, you just go at your normal speed that you go at home, and you're going to be on time.
Super interesting.
It shouldn't be a surprise when you're making it a different sport. If when you get to the horse show, say, "Oh, I'm at the competition. Now I have to go faster." Now that means you haven't done your training right.
The another thing that Neko say here is the dressage is very important on the horses, and he tried to do a lot of dressage on not pure dressage with passage and piaffe, but flight changes and turning and pirouettes and fast and slow and changing of speed and everything. And he say he have more control to go fast when he have a better dressage on the horse. You agree with this?
Absolutely, 100%. When we're in the ring, we have to control every footfall. I did a little mathematics on it. I was looking at a course that we have a facility in Rockwood, Ontario, Angel Stone, and the Grand Prix was set up, and it's not a huge ring. And I took the number of jumping efforts and I divided that into the time allowed, and it came in a little under 5 seconds per jumping effort. So when that horse was in the ring, every 5 seconds it had a jumping effort. That's how fast it was coming. And if you consider, that means maybe four or five strides between each jump on average, including combinations. So if you have to control every one of those strides, there's no time to fix it. Once the balance goes wrong, once the stride gets out of control, no time to fix it. So it can never get out of control. And once it's in that control, then you can go faster and faster and faster, and control doesn't change. The only thing that going faster requires is greater skill, and greater skill is better dressage. To Nelson's point, I couldn't agree more. And the other thing, to that point, whenever I'm training horses or teaching the riders, in my mind I'm thinking about your test and other course designers' tests at the horse show. And that's one of the big knocks I would have in North American equitation. Those riders are doing their equitation, they don't have the power in the gallop that they would need to jump a proper jump, a big jump. And so they learn how to go around these equitation courses with this unenergetic gallop, flat back jump. It makes it very easy to sit on the horse and control the horse. But all of a sudden, if you raise that jump up to 1.40 m, the gallop wasn't there and the balance wasn't there to do it. So in fact, they're not learning the right things. So if we were doing a little cavaletti, cantering cavalettis by example, and they look like they're doing it beautifully, I'd say, no, the energy in the gallop is useless. The only reason you can control that horse is because you haven't put any energy into his body. Now let's put some energy into his body, let a gallop on there and see if you have the same control. Well, of course they don't. So that's part of the learning exercise. But that's the control, that's a greater skill required by speeding it up or making your distances more challenging. Greater skills. And that's where the sport has gone, really. You watch the skill that the riders have to have, and riders of many decades ago were capable of learning those skills. The courses didn't necessarily require it though. But we learn to do things. As you dream them up, we learn to solve them. You dream up the problems, we'll dream up the solutions. And that's the ongoing challenge of course designers and riders and trainers. And it drives the sport to get better and better, in fact.
Well, super interesting. I think it's good. I hate to be the bad person here, but we reached the hour point. And Ian, I need to thank you very, very much for your time and for sharing all your thoughts and knowledges. It was super amazing. I learned a lot. And I'm sure that everyone here in La Tertulia Equestrian is going to learn a lot from you. So, Ian, I want to congratulate you. You're an icon in the sport. Everyone respects you and admires you. So thank you again for being with us. I know Carolo and Leopoldo wants to thank you also. So thank you again.
Thank you also.
Ian, thank you for coming. It's an honor for us to have you here. And are one person to can't help generations for the sport, but you helping a lot of people in your career, and you give it to the sport a lot. Thank you for do that, and we are lovers for the sport, and you are one of the person to contribute more for the sport.
Thank you, Leopoldo. And one thing, Leopoldo, you like to point out about our ages.
What?
Go ahead,
The
say it,
ages.
say it.
We have the same. We have the same age.
Exactly.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same age. We are in this for a long, long time. I remember. I was in Tampa the first time you bring in Big Bang to Tampa, and I see you in the green ring. Remember the grass ring half in the back that you training there and training there and training there. Big Bang at that time when you bring in Big Bang from Europe.
Ian, it's a great honor for me, because we have learned so much with you. It was a great pleasure. Thank you very much. My respect.